morning. It is September 26th, 2023. We're doing the New York Times Daily Newsletter. Today's propagandist is David Leonhardt. We are asking why recent progressive movements have been disappointing, and we're also covering strikes, the Black Sea, and Gucci. Elite capture. Three progressive movements have risen to prominence over the past 15 years and vowed to create a fairer America: Occupy Wall Street, Me Too, and Black Lives Matter. These are three entirely different groups made by entirely different people with entirely different purposes. So this should be interesting. All of them have had an impact. Occupy popularized the idea of the 1% and the 99%. Me Too led to the firing and sometimes jailing of sexual predators, as well as the hiring of more women in prominent jobs. Black Lives Matter led to policing reforms in some cities and the hiring of more black Americans in prominent jobs. That's not, neither of those are true. Still, none of these movements have come close to achieving their ambitions. Yeah, Black Lives Matter was a communist movement that was a scam. The people that did that have all been, the reason why it disappeared is because absolutely all of them were con artists. They all took the money and enriched their own lives and then disappeared. And they just took advantage of it. They didn't do a damn thing for anyone. Hysterical. Okay, so Congress has not passed any major laws to reduce economic, gender, or racial inequality, such as a wealth tax. Wealth tax, we already have so many taxes. A wealth tax isn't going to do anything. Universal pre-K or nationwide police reforms. Okay, universal pre-K. So what does that even mean? A bunch of spending for on pre-kindergarten programs. Okay, fine. What good does that do? And nothing. Police reforms. Yeah, there's a lot of things we could do, but not defunding the police, which was what Black Lives Matter did. That was their entire thing: was defund the police and replace them with social workers, because that works. Instead, taxes on the affluent are near their lowest level in decades. That's because of Biden, who cut, remember, Trump cut everybody's taxes, and then Biden raised everyone's taxes except for those making over 400,000, which is conveniently what Biden makes. So if you want to talk to people about the fact that the taxes are low on the rich and higher on the poor, thank Joe Biden. Let's see. The number of killings by police remains largely unchanged, and there's also not a lot of them. There's actually relatively few police killings. Like, it's less than 20 a year of an unarmed person. It is almost always someone that charged the cops. It's extremely rare that that police, they don't just go out and randomly kill people. That doesn't happen. The term reckoning was invoked again and again, and yet we don't seem to have reckoned with any of our problems in any meaningful way. Frederick DeBoer, a popular Substack newsletter writer, argues in a new book. Really, I want to know what explains these disappointments. In part, it's simply the political change it is simply that political change is fantastically difficult and often takes decades. That's not true. It goes quick. The vociferous minority has changed to the point where 5 years ago we didn't argue about what a woman was. Now we are. Now we can't have an agreement on that. But the degree of difficulty is only part of the story. The movements also bear some responsibility for their disappointments. Above all, they made decisions geared more toward changing elite segments of American society, like academia, Hollywood, and the national media, than toward passing new laws and changing most people's lives. Yeah, academia, Hollywood, and the national media are controlled entirely by the left. That's the central argument of DeBoer's book, How Elites Ate the Social Justice Movement. It has helped me to think about American politics, and I want to devote today's newsletter to the issue. This is going to be a bunch of propaganda. I'm sorry, but Occupy Wall Street. The reason why that one started off as being everybody, but it then got co-opted by a bunch of leftists who tried to turn it into a socialist movement, which then drove out everyone. And that's why you saw all the old people leave and things like that, because you started spouting off socialist ideals. It wasn't about socialism. The next thing that happened with Black Lives Matter, that spawned during the Obama years after the Ferguson riots, which were based on a lie. Hands up, don't shoot was a lie, and I've discussed they're a con artist anyway. And Me Too was that was also something where they over exaggerated things. There was a whole bunch of issues in Hollywood. Leftist Hollywood is filled with a bunch of rapists. Okay, but that doesn't mean that everybody that men that work in regular jobs are rapists. It's just that we took that and expanded it to apply to all men, except it doesn't apply to all men. It was just the sickos in Hollywood that were doing that stuff. Radical and practical. The most successful political movements tend to share a few features. They start with activists whose goals can seem so audacious as to be unrealistic. No, that's not true at all. I'm not going to explain how to make a proper movement, though. Otherwise, there would be no need for a movement. Over time, the movement's leaders make careful decisions about how to accomplish at least some of these goals. They appeal to public opinion. They collaborate with unlikely allies. They work with the system to change the system. They work the system to change the system. It was true of the civil rights movement, which combined radical aims with patriotic symbols and nonviolent protest. More recently, the gay rights movement accomplished rapid change partly by emphasizing traditional values like marriage and military service. The lessons also apply to the political right. Abortion opponents spent decades patiently taking over the Republican Party and making the case that voters have a right to choose their own policies, state by state. I like how they pretend. Okay, so read that again. So they abortion opponents spent decades patiently taking over the Republican Party. No, people that tend to be more conservative are far less likely to kill their kids. That's not a normal human trait. Recent progressive movements have tended to be less strategic, explains DeBoer, a self described leftist. Of course, he's a leftist because he's presenting propaganda. So, of course, I mean, the right presents propaganda too, but not in the New York Times because the New York Times is leftist. Let's see. Explain self-described leftist. Occupy celebrated its lack of structure, including its lack of concrete goals. It didn't have. That's not true. Demands are disempowering since they require someone else to respond. One Occupy protester told the New York Times in 2011. Black Lives Matter refused to name leaders. Yeah, that's not true. Patrice Collier's, a whole bunch of other ones. And they all stole money, and they all got a whole bunch of really nice houses in white neighborhoods too. They're just liars. So let's see. Contrasting the approach with the old top-down civil rights movement. Me Too benefiting its hashtag didn't quite become an organized movement. Yeah, because not most men aren't sick pedophiles like in Hollywood. It started off in Hollywood, and it was a bunch of Hollywood women who came forward saying, "Yeah, I've been abused too. Me too, me too." And then the left tried to say, "Oh, all men are bad." No, it's just you sickos on the left. None of these three created a mass organization with a long-term plan, as labor unions, civil rights groups, evangelical Christians, and other successful movements did in the past decades. Now, Black Lives Matter has been around for about a decade now, and they've got a lot of money. It's just they got caught with their fraud, so now they're falling apart. Occupying Black Lives Matter also allowed unpopular positions to shape their public image and weaken them. For instance, polling shows that most Black Americans support major changes to policing, but not less policing. Yeah, and that was the primary thing: was defund the police. Much of Black Lives Matter, however, focused on cutting police funding. One organizer wrote a Times opinion article that said, "Yes, we mean literally abolish the police." I'm surprised they actually mentioned that. Because the Democrats lied and said, "Oh, no, we're not talking about that." Yes, you are. Recent movements have instead had more success changing elite institutions that tend to be filled by fellow liberals. The winners of prestigious cultural awards have become more diverse. Media organizations now capitalize black when describing someone's race, which is foolish beyond belief. There's no reason to do that. President Biden has made Juneteenth a federal holiday. Universities emphasize identity in their curriculums. So identity politics, not a good thing. That's actually a bad thing. Those are not things to celebrate. Those are all bad changes. I'm surprised they didn't mention the Black National Anthem. That's incredibly divisive. Symbols over substance. Those are real changes, but DeBoer notes that they have little effect on most people's lives. They instead reflect what the political philosopher Try calls the elite's capture of social justice campaigns. Today, DeBoer writes, left activist spaces are dominated by the college educated. They always were. That's where all leftism comes from the universities, many of whom grew up in affluence and have not worked a day at a physically or emotionally demanding job. For that reason, these spaces prioritize the immaterial and symbolic over the material and concrete. Yeah, it's because it's a bunch of people with luxury beliefs. Socialism is like that. People that experience socialism don't like it. It's only leftists in this country that have wonderful lives, that have benefited by capitalism and get to have the luxury belief that the workers are oppressed. No, they're not. The point is related to continuing theme of the newsletter, the class inversion of American politics. DeBoer's writing can be withering, as the best polemists often are, and few people will agree with all of his arguments, but his central point is important. Whether you're part of the political left, center, or right, calling out injustice isn't the same as fighting it. The spirit of 2020, which was just riots. That's all it was. Spirit of 2020 was always a righteous spirit. No, it wasn't. And the people and the organizations that powered the movement had legitimate grievances and moral demands, he writes. What we need is practicality, resilience, and a plan. No, there was no legitimate grievances in 2020. In 2020, people were rioting because they were locked down and they were going crazy. The George Floyd, riots had nothing to do with any kind of police injustice. There wasn't injustice there. The dude died of a drug overdose, and everybody acted like the cops killed him when they didn't. Okay, they played video that was misleading. They didn't show you the body cam footage. They didn't show you George Floyd asking to be taken down to the ground. He's sitting there talking and saying, he says, I can't breathe when he's standing up and no one's touching him. He died of a drug overdose. Then people rioted. They rioted because a guy passed out in the Wendy's parking lot when he was drunk. And then when the cops came to arrest him, he fought with the cops, tried to take a cop's taser and shoot it at him. And then the cops shot him and everybody protested. They rioted over that. They burned the Wendy's to the ground. They rioted when a guy tried to kidnap his kids and then tried to go into his car against police commands, tried to grab a knife to stab cops. The cops shot him and somehow he sued and got money from them. People rioted over that. They rioted when a guy literally who killed his own girlfriend shot himself in the head on tape, and people blamed the cops even though he killed himself, and they rioted for that. They literally rioted for a murderer. It wasn't righteous. Does the conversation around social justice, especially in the media and academia, actually serve the less fortunate and oppressed? No, it doesn't. It makes their lives worse. Pamela Paul, a Times columnist, wrote that she hoped DeBoer's book would be read, especially by those on the left. Why? Just go read Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. That's what you're doing in trying to destroy the country. That's all this guy is. That's just a rehash of Rules for Radicals. Politics. Biden will join striking auto workers on the picket line in Detroit today. Unusual show of support for unions by a U.S. president, which is wholly inappropriate for a president to go strike with auto workers. That's just no. More military aid for Ukraine is a sticking point in the Senate talks to avoid a government shutdown. Read what services like national parks and food aid a shutdown would affect. Yeah, just keep this in mind. We're paying the salaries of first aid workers, farmers, firemen, all kinds of jobs in Ukraine right now. And those are going to continue to be paid if the government gets shut down. But we're going to take away benefits from you to make it hurt, which is what the Democrats do. They purposefully do things to make it hurt. And then they blame the GOP and say, oh, the GOP is doing this. We're not compromising in any way. We're demanding everything, but it's the GOP's fault. Best part is people believe him. Senator Robert Menendez, a New Jersey Democrat facing corruption charges, denied wrongdoing and said he would not resign. Some Democrats said he should. They knew what Menendez was doing the entire time. This is not novelty by any stretch. They knew about it when they voted for him the last time. These allegations are not fresh. The reason why they're coming up now is because it's a coordinated attack to go after Thomas. What they're doing is Democrats are saying that, hey, we want Menendez to resign because one standard of corruption, and then they're going to say that Thomas and Alito have to resign. It's just a dirty, underhanded attack. And they're just sacrificing one of their own because they don't care. 7 Republican presidential candidates have qualified for tomorrow night's primary debate. Donald Trump, the frontrunner, does not plan to attend. There is no purpose in these other ones. It's going to be Trump. Fox News will host a November debate between Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor of California. The two often criticize each other. That's because Gavin Newsom is going to be the nominee. Joe Biden is not running, mark my words. Ukraine said it killed the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in a missile strike on Crimea. The claim could not be verified, which U.S. intelligence most certainly helped them do. Russia struck one of the main ports in Ukraine uses to ship grain, hitting warehouses and dozens of trucks. Vladimir Putin is trying to maintain military control of the Black Sea. Still, notice that no mention of the counteroffensive because it's done. They're not making any more gains, and we're coming up on mud season, so it's time to end this war. Hollywood strikes. The Striking Actors Union is studying the deal. Studios struck with writers to inform their bargaining strategy. The studios and actors unions have not spoken in more than 2 months. No talks are scheduled. Members of the Actors Union voted to authorize a strike against 10 major video game companies. Variety reports. China. Biden hosted Pacific Island leaders at the White House. The U.S. is competing with China for influence in the region and losing. The Philippine Coast Guard removed Chinese barriers that blocked Filipino fishing boats in the South China Sea, a direct challenge to Beijing. Let's see. Giant new oil and gas wells are threatening aquifers that support drinking water. That's just a lie. They're not threatening anything. That's just the way you're wording that. Use of coal and oil could peak this decade as cleaner energy technologies spread, according to the International Energy Agency. Now, they're doing that based on their demand to try and decarbonize the world. Remember, you are the carbon they want to remove. And the rich, Al Gore, he's not going to stop burning carbon based fuels for his lifestyle. His 10 mentions aren't going anywhere. American companies are investing in solar panel production, entering an industry dominated by China. Scientists in California briefly reproduced the process of fusion that powers the sun, repeating an experiment from last year but generating much more energy. A fuel depot exploded in Azerbaijan's breakaway Karabakh region, killing at least 20 people. Armenian refugees trying to evacuate were in line for gas. A third person was charged in the death of a 1-year-old boy at a Bronx daycare over fentanyl stored in the floorboards, which is just awful. The government can stem the rapid rise in child poverty. There's no such thing as child poverty by reviving pandemic relief programs, especially the expanded child tax credit. That's just inflation. And that makes life worse for everyone. There's no poor children. Children don't work. It's their parents that don't have money. And giving government money, that was just a form of UBI. And that's part of why the inflation keeps going up. You print fake money that's not worth anything. People chase the same goods and services. It drives prices up. A proposed mine in Alaska would destroy the world's largest salmon fishery. Congress should step in and save the waters. Column by Michael Golden on a failing anti-racism center. Racism isn't a significant problem in this country. We lose our identity. Coral Italy is famous for its clams, but invasion of blue crabs is threatening the spaghetti alle vongole. Bulletproof backpacks. A mother who survived a school shooting herself struggles to send her children to school each fall. Stop the SSRIs. Mammals first appeared on Earth about 250 million years ago. Scientists say we have another 250 million years ahead of us. Amicable and mutual celebrities say they are fine with their breakups. Are they being honest? Who cares? Let's see. Fashion. Who cares? Hey, look, real food. Know this day in history today.